All right, I would like to call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for October 8th, 2019. The meeting is being both video and audio recorded. Commissioner Planzer is participating remotely as her physical presence is unreasonably difficult. And Mr. Rafter, the airport manager, is at a conference. So Mr. Carver, the assistant manager, is prepared to stand in.
Thank you.
Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, it is adopted. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of September 10th? No. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of September 10th. So moved. Second.
Second.
How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I also would entertain a motion to ratify the warrant of September 25th, 2019, and approve the warrant of October 9, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Go ahead.
Thank you. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Is there public comment at this time? No? Pending leases and contracts. You want to run through those, Mr. Carberg?
Sure. Our first item for pending leases and contracts is a pending item with Tidal Creeks. This is one of our new
Well, we're not
lessees.
going to worry about that because it's not ready to go, right?
Correct.
We're going to do it next time. Let's just do the
So that
ones
will
that are
remain pending receipt of some documentation.
correct.
For Harbor Fuel Oil Company, we have an amendment and restatement of a lease. This is for Harbor Fuel's L-shaped lot in the bunker area. We were holding it up just to address some language changes, clarifying vehicle storage uses.
But is it ready to be?
And it is now ready, correct, Katie?
We have
It's
a
ready for
handout
approval.
today.
All right.
For Infiltrator project, the purpose is to solicit quotes to replace an infiltrator that runs adjacent to Bunker Road and under a tenant's lot. There's some urgency with the end of the season and the tenant's use of the leasehold. So with this item, we're asking the commission to authorize the chair to enter into an agreement when these bids come in shortly.
All right. Next.
For the skid steer, we're looking to take delivery of a second small skid steer with brush cutting attachments. It's predominantly used for our ecological mowing that we do for our permit, with some secondary uses for snow removal and light construction. What we've done is we've moved a lot of our maintenance in-house. Personally, our maintenance staff does a great job taking care of equipment, storing it. I think in the long run, they've proven this is a more cost-effective way than contracting management to keep it in-house. And Gemtech, aka X1, this is to replace our current FBO software. It's an operational point of sale system and database, and there's some cost increase when compared against our existing system, but we believe the difference is well worth it.
Any questions?
No, and this is where I saw the John Deere, so you need to add an E to that, please, if it is in fact the company. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions?
That's the only thing I
All right, I will
noticed.
entertain a motion to approve the amendment and restatement of lease with Harbor Fuel Corp., the contract with Schmidt Equipment, Inc., and the contract with Gemtech. And we'll handle the other one separately.
So moved.
So second,
Second.
how do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
On the, thank you, chair votes aye. And on the infiltrator replacement, I ask for a motion to authorize me to review and approve a contract that is now out for quotes up to the amount, the maximum amount allowed for such form of procurement, and to go ahead and sign the contract myself on behalf of the commission.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. All right, crew quarter development.
There's no major change. We did provide our consultant feedback, and we do expect a report shortly. We're looking forward to this to help inform our environmental assessment 5-year scope. Moving on to the town.
He's also working on a financial model, right?
That is correct.
Any questions on that? The Town Government Study Committee?
I have 2 items for you on the Town Government Study Committee. Staff met with a capital committee on October 1st. One of the items we discussed in this session was the airport's interest in overcoming our project's appropriation hurdles by engaging the Government Study Committee. The Capcom expressed both their support and their interest to be a continuing part of the process. We transmitted them a copy of the letter to John Brescher and the draft statement to the Government Study Committee. I believe we have that as a handout, Katie? We have that as a handout for you. And per direction from the last meeting from the Airport Commission, we are meeting with legal to discuss draft warrant article language related to option 1, which would give the select board ability to appropriate. And we'll follow up with a call with council to review that approach and language.
Any questions?
This will stay on the agenda, I
Yes.
presume.
All right, hold on to your hats and buckle your seatbelts. Mr. Carberg has a presentation on the summer.
Okay. It looks like a lot, but Dave and I are going to rip through some of the slides really quickly together. One of the items that we were tasked with and we're happy to bring to you is a review of the summer, and we tried to give it some context. We're trying to tell a little bit of a story with both statistics and some anecdotes. Here's the agenda for you. We're going to talk about the preseason, then the summer, 3 categories that are used to seeing statistics, and then end with some final thoughts on strategic planning. So the preseason, I have it broken down.
Questions as we go along, or do you want us to wait till the end?
Whatever your preference is, I'm
All right, if you have
happy as we
questions,
go.
go ahead and bring them up.
So I have bullets 1 and 2 broken up, but really it was after we closed service last fall, we had an ongoing conversation, open communication with our airlines. As they started notifying us of schedule increases, we decided we needed to meet and talk about how to handle this. And we did this on December 10th of last year in Boston. And we determined that the airport would work to increase capacity and amenities, TSA would work to increase their staffing, and airlines would work to improve their coordination and communication. Going to go through these service increases very quickly. There is a concept that I want to make sure I discuss also. As always, new entrants, Southern Airways Express enter the market, 30 weekly arrivals between Norwood, Providence, and New Haven. American Airlines, they began their season 2 weeks early. They added their Saturday Charlotte turn 2 weeks early. They added an additional LaGuardia flight on Mondays through Thursdays. And for the last week of their August season, they kept LaGuardia and DC on 1 week later than expected. They also executed what some call a bank pinch. And this ends up being really important when we talk about Nantucket service. And I'll go through that in the next slide. So what is banking or scheduled banking? Banking is the process of clustering flights at a hub by an airline. It's done for a number of reasons. It's a shorter connection time for the passenger. It gives the passenger option to make use of more connections. And honestly, it's a big cost savings for an airline as well. What it does is it leads to peakier peaks and lower lows. So the busier times at airports get busy and the off times become more off. And it's a trickle-down approach. You see it in an airport like Nantucket, where we have several airlines that operate with service to different hubs. All of those airlines, without coordinating with each other, they tend to all put their service on at the same time. So just to pick on American, we're looking at their Saturday summer peak schedule in 2018 and 2019. See, in 2018, they had their service spaced pretty well throughout the day, accommodating almost 2 hours to complete a turn. In 2019, this was down to 1.4, and you can see where they pinched their service down into 2 tighter connections. So there's our pinch. So that's what I mean when I discuss a bank pinch.
But I thought you said at the beginning that the bank pinch related to the service at the hubs.
It's related to service at the hubs, but it has a trickle-down effect to sort of the outlying airports. Delta.
So they're just so I'm clear, they're
course.
geared more to, the service here is geared more to what's going on at their hubs than it is to what's going on here, is what you're really saying.
Correct. And when you look at our service profile, 80% of our traffic is actually from beyond major markets. It's from Chicago and Denver and San Francisco. It's not necessarily from Metro Boston and Metro New York. So these individuals need to take advantage of those connections.
Okay, thank you.
So Delta pulled their Monday through Thursday daily LaGuardia this year. They added a flight. It's a little complicated, but they added a little bit of weekend service, but they also executed a bank pinch. So even though we were handling less Delta traffic over the week, it was more difficult for us to handle because they executed a bank pinch on the weekends.
Were those flights to LaGuardia or were they to somewhere else?
To LaGuardia.
LaGuardia.
And JetBlue was a major addition. They added destinations in LaGuardia and HPN and White Plains, and they increased JFK frequency. United started a week earlier in June. They corresponded it by ending a week earlier in September. And they also executed a bank pinch, which was exacerbated by sharing of a common ground handler in Delta Global Services, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Delta. So there was one ground handler turning those two
Who
flights.
gets priority? You don't have to answer that.
The answer is yes. So what we were working on internally is we were looking at our existing square footage at the time and trying to figure out how we were going to fit these people. The black line represented what we thought our maximum sort of comfort level was. This was assigning 11 or 12 square feet per passenger, looking at peak enplanement times and seeing when we were over. The red line is the fire code. So we very quickly saw that we were going to have an issue coming up with service this spring. TSA was doing the exact same thing. This is TSA's graph. Their horizontal bar is the lower. The orange one is their throughput rate. So their throughput rate for one lane was exceeded most of the day on Saturday. It was
What
also,
did you say it was? I'm sorry, Noah, to
of
interrupt.
course.
What did you say TSA called?
This is TSA's throughput rate, the number of passengers that they can process through screening.
Thank you. Sorry.
Right. So one lane, they can process around 140 passengers an hour. 2 lanes, it's up around 275, 280. And that 2 lane was even forecast to be exceeded. And mind you, this was before American added a little bit more service and before some other service was retooled. And it assumed everybody arrived on time and when they said they would. So TSA very quickly saw the need that they would have to address staffing and they would have to address their security protocol to keep up with the demand. Really quickly, I know you're familiar with the boarding area. This is what we brought to the table. Mass DOT came with a lot of money as well, which we appreciate. It was an upgraded tent, the floor, the tent, adding a concessionaire, which received positive feedback. It gave us 184 additional passengers when compared to just our brick and mortar hold room. So 125-ish in the brick and mortar, plus another 184 for outside. The feedback was almost universally positive, but this was a very challenging procurement to execute and roll out in a short amount of time. Unresponsive bidders. It was challenging. Here's a picture while it was in progress. You can see the concrete circles, which was the old fence, and then the expanded fence. So that's a clear aerial with footprint and how it expanded and shifted a little bit. Lower left-hand corner was just upon completion when it was empty, and lower right-hand corner was most weekends as well as Fridays and Mondays. We also had Mass DOT invested in PCC hard stand improvements on our air carrier ramp. $800,000 they contributed. It addressed premature ramp failure, rutting that we had in 2-year-old pavement. This was done on hard stands 3, 4, and 5. So 3 is in the middle of the screen, 4 is moving to the top of the screen, 5 is all the way at the top, which is just being cut out in that picture, as well as Taxi Lane Hotel. Here is a drone video. If you check out we actually have a YouTube page now with a number of videos uploaded on it. This was some drone video where I took a still shot by our contractor. It shows 4 JetBlue E190s on the ground at the same time. It's a better view of the hard stands and taxiway hotel. We also did some patchwork. This was utilized some underruns from Mass DOT money. It addressed not only failures, but anticipated failures and a patch of a patch. The dark spot in the red circle was a 2018 patch, and I think the animation will circle one more as we go through. All right, so those are our 2018 patches. This area on Taxiway Alpha was a shove that we fixed twice with asphalt. We then fixed it again with a concrete bridge. Again, we expect the large air carrier traffic and old pavements caused the pavement shove as an aircraft held for the whole line. We were able to repair that before the season. This is a transverse crack on Echo near Delta. We were able to repair that as well. I'm told it felt like a speed bump while aircraft were taxiing. And this is our patch of a patch. On the right-hand side, you can see this was the original repair. We had alligator cracking where a failure was incipient. We addressed it initially. It failed again where you can see rutting in the left side of the picture. We believe the second failure was due to chemical stripping involved in the sublayer. We have more work being done on that now. Mass DOT is helping us with some forensic laboratory analysis. And then the unsung heroes, it's an airport presentation, so I'm talking about airport things. TSA really came to the table. They increased their staffing, 5 officers in total. They added 1 to the local force, 4 to the national deployment force. What it did, 5 people may not sound like a lot, but it enabled 2-lane screening for all of the peak seasons. And it also optimized screening. Lane 1 functioned as a blended lane, where they were able to execute standard screening as well as pre-check, with lane 2 as a dedicated pre-check. And when 50% of our passengers, more or less, are enrolled in TSA pre-check, so it's a very good idea for here. It's a high percentage of the traveling public. When that lane was empty, they also pulled from the non-TSA pre-check population and moved them through. When I say anecdotes, administrative staff, Mr. Rafter, David, and myself split weekends for the summer. And what we saw was a really great job by TSA. The point isn't that we avoided long TSA screening lines, but we saw those lines move quickly. We saw them work through the flow. We saw passengers more or less happy, and we saw passengers making their flights. And we think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
Should we write them a letter?
I think we should, because we want to make sure we get that staff again.
Is this agreeable to everybody?
Oh, yes.
So I'm switching over to a statistical summary of the summer. From TSA, every morning we get an anticipated screening counts. That's something we've been provided with for the last 3 years that informs this graph. You can see that the period around 4th of July and following is always interesting. Every date has been a different day of the week for 4th of July. But our peaks are peakier and our troughs are less trothy as well. We've seen increases in our securely screened passenger count every day of the week for the last 3 years. It's the same data set. I've just broken it down a little different visually. I've also looked at our developer here, our non-secure terminal passengers by month. I've also included Tradewinds. That's the acronym GPD. Goodspeed is their air traffic name. It doesn't really make a difference in the stats whether I include them or not. The patterns are still the same, but you can see that our passenger count for the summer has been decreasing in the non-secure market. And then in the general aviation passenger market, that count has also been decreasing this last year. It might be a little, you might be wondering about that when the GA side of the house continues to be very profitable. My answer is that our revenues aren't made on the passenger, they're made on the aircraft. And we are seeing, continued evolution in the fleet where we're servicing flat or fewer aircraft, but those aircraft are more profitable to service. They're heavier, they pay more in fees, they take more fuel.
The only thing that's passenger dependent is the catering, right?
That's true. For my purposes, I think this is the most interesting graph, and I'm going to show it to you in 2 steps because I think for the layperson, it shows what the evolution has been in our terminal traffic. This black line represents the sum total of our June, July, and August passengers that go through the terminal. You can see that it's roughly 70 to 90,000, and it has been since we renovated the terminal in 2009. What I've done now is that line has gone to gray, and I want to look at the lines with dots on them. I want to look at what has the percentage of traffic been by side of the house, secure versus not secure. You can see that when the terminal was renovated and reopened in 2009, about 60% of our in-plane traffic in the summer was non-secure passengers, and that's declined steadily. Taking its place has been securely screened passengers. Our total enplanements, while they've varied over that time period, haven't markedly increased. What we've seen is a reordering, not necessarily an increase in traffic. So it follows, at least in my accounting, that we need to shift our resources, our square footage, the amount of ticket counters to accommodate the shift in traffic.
It seems to me there is some implication from that the people who are coming to the island are coming farther away. And I wonder if that's borne out by other statistic gatherers.
There's a section in the updated Mass DOT economic impact report that pegs us as a very high percentage of visitor traffic. And I think it fits anecdotally with what we've observed, that most locals, that we've lost a lot of locally enplaning traffic to Hyannis to the boats.
No, but I mean the fact that there has been the shift, total numbers stay relatively flat, and that there's been a shift to the trunk carriers, if you will, which would imply that people are coming from farther away.
I would agree. I'd like to work to put some more definitive
As I say, I
bounds
wonder
on
if
that.
anybody, I know the chamber does some surveys or the mass tourism. It'd be interesting to see if there's any correlation with their numbers.
So secure operations, again, the operators whose passengers go through screening, again, as you'd expect, those have increased month to month, year over year in the last 3 years. Our non-secure operations have also increased this July and August. Benefit, we've had Southern Airways. Again, it doesn't necessarily match when you look at the enplanement data, but Southern Airlines started where they weren't enplaning a lot of people. And then again, just to compare our general aviation operations counts, they're flat to declining, but again, it's a shift in the user and the fleet, and it still remains a very profitable market sector, more and more so on an individual basis. And then I wanted to tie operations to enplanements, looking at our terminal market share by our aircraft seating capacity. So for this summer, June through August, 48% of our passengers arrived. 48% of our passengers who came through the terminal arrived on 100-seat JetBlue E190s. A quarter of our passengers came among the various 9-seat operators. And another quarter of the passengers came on Delta and American on 50 to 76-seat jets. So I'm transitioning from operations to noise. I'm going to show 4 graphs in succession that are related. I'm going to go from operations to noise. From 2013 to 2019, again, I'm looking at June through August totals. I'm looking at our operation totals with the gray backgrounds and then breaking them down into IFR operations and VFR operations. That's on the left. Then on the right, I'm just looking at the percentage of each. And I think it fits, really as no surprise for those, as our VFR commuter, as our local commuter market has declined, which was predominantly VFR, and as our corporate traffic has remained steady and our secure traffic has increased, that we would see a larger percentage of IFR operations in our makeup. We also have been tracking noise complaints by detailed type since 2013. In the gray background, I have total noise complaints, and then I have them broken down to what was the source of the aircraft generating that complaint. Was it an IFR or a VFR complaint? And then, of course, on the right, I've turned it into, I've relativized it by percent. You can see that VFR complaints, when we had 3 carriers doing a lot of business, were our dominant complaint type. And as we've moved through years more recently, IFR complaints become a dominant complaint type. And then to sum up, it's messy, but when you relativize this, this graph tells you how often do people complain? How many complaints do you get per 1,000 operations by each type? We are pretty consistent. We're, half a complaint to 4 complaints per 1,000 operations, depending on type. I didn't show the error bars because they made the graph even more messy. I think there's an instinct here to say that the IFR complaint rate is increasing. There's a lot of statistical noise there. We will keep an eye on that, but I wouldn't draw any conclusions from that yet. So this is a slide provided by McFarland Johnson. They're the noise consultant that we hired to do some noise monitoring, predominantly on the south ramp, but also on the north ramp. They came in purposely on a busy weekend in the summer. I forget which festival this lined up with, but it was from a Friday afternoon through a Sunday evening, and they set up monitors in 3 fixed locations for that 3-day period, and then they took a number of assorted measurements at other locations. To go through the areas, the R1 through the R5, hold on a minute, let me refer to my notes. R1 is a location on the perimeter road, roughly between the approach to 6 and taxiway Juliet. So it's behind a screen of trees from the runway. R2 is in line with taxiway Delta on the southwest ramp. R3 is next to the ARF station. And those were locations that were monitored continually, and the consultant built DNLs as if that were the entire annual contribution to the DNL. So what you're seeing is a DNL, a day-night average sound level for that 3-day period. And you can see 62 decibels from R1 to 80 decibels at the ARF station. The remaining 2 locations, what the consultant is calling the viewing lot, is the Monahans Road pull-off by gate 31, which is just behind the ARF station. And R5 is the north ramp at the extended rental car parking area across from Hangar 2. Those were done with LEQ measurements. An LEQ is a weighted sound average. An LEQ of 1 hour is an average sound exposure over an hour. An LEQ of 5 minutes is average sound exposure over 5 minutes. So you're not measuring just an event, you're measuring an average intensity over a time period. And I'm sorry, but it's not clear to me if what the consultant is representing for R4 and R5 are hourly LEQs or a different measure. But we look forward to taking receipt of this draft report. It's due on the 15th. We'll give comments, we'll get a final report, and get it to the commission for their review. But it will be a technical approach to noise, predominantly in the South Ramp, Monahans Road area.
Can you go back to that for 1 second? So what I note on this, that I think we, obviously we need to get the rest of the report, but you've got some 90 decibel readings essentially at the ARF station, and as well as, I take it the shading area is the hours that the tower is closed, and you've got some 70 and 80 decibel readings happening at like 1 in the morning.
Right. If I may, so those happen to be the hours the tower is closed. Those are also the DNL penalty hours. So an operation, the sound level for an operation that occurs between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. gets an extra, I believe, 10 decibels weighted to it to account for the sort of things sound louder at night effect. But that's a reason for the shading.
So the ones within the shading have had 10 decibels added to them? Is that what you're saying?
No, I believe as they're shown in the shading were their real-time values, but when the model is created, those are weighted even heavier since they occur at night.
We'll look for the report.
Yeah. We'll talk about the meeting after. Okay, go ahead, Noah. Thank you.
I thought this was too good not to share. It reminds me of a 3D puzzle. If you just take a second and don't focus on the numbers, but just try to zoom out, you see a lot of red. The red is bad. What this is the average 5-year visibility conditions for Nantucket, the Vineyard, and Hyannis from the top to bottom. And the numbers are the percentage of days where those airports are below their operating conditions. And you see a lot of red for Nantucket. Our weather really is a lot worse. This is something JetBlue keeps track of. And you can see that July is typically a tough month on Nantucket before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. I think I have some animation there, Dave.
Fog.
Thank you. Fog, yeah. Exactly. There were 3 days this July where JetBlue lost, I think, $2, $3, or $4 million from canceled operations, just hotel bills, rebooking, crew downtime. So what we hear from JetBlue is they have an interest in operating in sort of this sweet spot that I've circled. Ideally, they don't want to operate in Nantucket in off conditions. When it comes to the weather, no presentation on Nantucket is complete without mentioning it. And credit to the air traffic division at JetBlue for putting this graph together. Oh, and in regards to JetBlue, I apologize. I passed it over earlier in my notes. Greg Jenkins is on vacation in Italy. He would love to come back to a commission meeting when he is not out of the country, answer questions, talk about JetBlue's involvement in Nantucket and their operational strategy.
Welcome that.
So moving on to our summer financial performance. Jet fuel is important to Nantucket, so what I've done here is I've looked at our major users, our major airline uptakers of jet fuel from 2018 and 2019, and I've ordered them by the change in their uplift year over year. So from June to July, we pumped extra 60,000 gallons of jet fuel. We were up about 6%. But it was very uneven across the board by user. You'll note that American was responsible for 63% of that uplift alone. United was next with 34%. JetBlue was, we're grateful for it, but 14%. It's not in line with increase in service that they've had. All of these airlines have very different fuel strategies. JetBlue tends to tanker through Nantucket and only take fuel on in their hub locations where they have good deals on contract fuel. United is an interesting case. When they switched from the Dash A to the ERJ, that aircraft comes in empty, and we capture 100% of those aircraft for an uplift of 400 to 500 gallons each time. So United's E145 is very profitable for us to service, as is American's E175. It's just a note on if we start thinking strategically about who to engage in future air service development, not every aircraft, not every operator provides the same financial return to the airport. I did something for 100 low lead just because I did something for Jet A. I don't have much to discuss on it, but it's there. I'm going to start slowly, then I'm going to rip through this really quickly. We wanted to look at what the benefit was for just this summer's increased flights over last year financially. So for Americans, extra 2 Charlotte flights, that was 37 passengers. We made extra landing fees on the aircraft, fuel sales on the aircraft, PFC entitlement, miscellaneous spending, more passengers makes our advertising more valuable, etc. So for those 2 Charlotte flights, we made about additional Charlotte flights, the airport made about $2,500. If you take that through the rest of our large air carriers, find out that we made $200,000. And you're right to say, well, $200,000 didn't just the tent cost Mass DOT $306,000. That's not really why. Why would we do that? But the answer is then when you take this through what the effect is on local revenue. So Americans to Charlotte flights, 37 passengers. If you take the Mass DOT economic impact report, these extra passengers, almost 10 grand in retail, 15K in lodging, 13,000 at restaurants, 9,000 on local transport. Typically it's predominantly rental cars. We have more options now, but that's still going there. But that's $46,000 in local revenue. And when you combine everything, that's $12 million in local revenue just from the addition of our flights. And, we're not the only ones. We actually have the smallest revenue component of this picture. The airport made $200,000 more in revenue. Local business owners made $12 million. The town of Nantucket, through tax revenue, made $284,000 from their meals and lodging tax. And then the light bulb goes off. Oh, here's why the state DOT would invest in us. They're seeing this back through state tax revenue. They're seeing $750,000 a year from their roughly $1.1 million investment. So,
Is town government aware of the economic impact of these larger flights that are coming in, and the fact that those passengers are spending a lot more money than the guy getting off the Hyannis flight? I think that, we need to sell the airport, and I think this is a way to. I don't know if they're aware of this, the select board. This is important for us, that they're aware of this type of impact.
I agree. We have to come up with a strategy to do that, I think.
Commissioner Buscarin would like this next point. Then the town of Nantucket budget from 19 to 20 for their revenue line item, budget rooms and meals tax. 3.8 million was budgeted in 2019. 4.3 million was budgeted in fiscal year 20. Just the additional service at Nantucket accounted for 52% of that.
Wasn't
Budget
there an
growth.
increase in the room tax during that period? From, maybe it was from 18 to 19.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I think there was.
I think it was part of that whole Airbnb
Right.
tax as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when it went into effect, though. But,
It was this summer, but for only contracts which commenced after the first of the year.
and so maybe, well, then it should have shown up in the fiscal year 20 budget, except you can't budget for revenue. You don't have any basis for budgeting,
Right.
so.
Right.
But it's worth asking the question.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
And then a few anecdotes, Nantucket, gateway to the Cape, connecting hub. It's been brought to our attention. More and more people are flying to Nantucket, finding their way to the boat and taking the boat to get to Chatham or Eastham or the National Seashore. People are connecting in Nantucket. So this is a passenger who will come in off JetBlue, sit in a hold room and go somewhere else. We're actually the only connection, I believe, from White Plains to DC on JetBlue. We're that route for them. It's never going to be a dominant financial strategy for us, but again, these are passengers we can capture. These are PFCs. We realize without having that same impact on TSA security or other parts of the airport. Another anecdote, when we had something we called Meltdown Saturday, on the Saturday following the 4th of July. This was Saturday when the air traffic system melted down. LaGuardia, JFK, Newark had 3, 4, and 5 hour delays. We had 1,800 passengers go through security, and it was a very difficult day, not only for airport staff, but for TSA,
Is that
for the
weather in
airlines.
New York that slowed things down, or just?
It was weather in New York.
Weren't we still having runway problems at that point too?
We still had the intersection of Bravo and Echo closed. But that was actually not the reason for Meltdown Saturday, thankfully.
It contributed probably to the state of mind.
It probably didn't help. But 1,800 I think the count was 1,876 passengers on Meltdown Saturday versus a smooth Sunday had 2,000 passengers. But New York wasn't under air traffic delay, and everything was crowded, but everything more or less ran fairly smoothly. People were happy that the concession was there. The concessionaire was happy with us. They're going to follow up in a meeting with Tom and myself. They mentioned that the White Plains flight was their best seller. When the White Plains flight on JetBlue took a delay, they had a good day and they went out for dinner. So that's something they look forward to. And then we also have to acknowledge, we should acknowledge Nantucket Police Department and the work they did on curb frontage management. I think our TNC community is also more used in year 2 to where they need to go to operate. I'm not saying it was perfect, but for what it could have been with this level of air service, our curb worked very well this summer. And very quickly, I don't want to come here to lecture to the commission about philosophy, but there's a role we've been patching holes for a long time, and I think there's a role to talk about strategic planning for the future, to consider it in future roles. The item that I see we could improve on collectively is a philosophy to inform a design metric. And what I mean by that for a philosophy, I talked to my friend who's an architect, and he says, well, architecture is socially constituted. If you're building a shelter, but you're also meeting people's social needs. And as our commission, it is certainly eminently within your domain to decide how far do you go to meet shelter and social needs. That's a philosophy. The other is the causal direction. Are you shaped by events or are you shaping events? Certainly we're all shaped by broader market forces. But how are you also a shaper of the Nantucket community or people's perception of our community? And these are generally items that should lead to us coalescing on what a common design metric should be, whether it's for airport capacity or airport ramp or airport facilities such as the terminal. And some common design metrics, and in no favorite order of mine, are designing towards an average day of a peak month, or conversely, the peak day of an average month, a percentage of a peak hour of passenger flow, 85% is common in the industry, or you build a hypothetical demand day based on your existing or forecast future carriers. And then the other side of that is a strategy on fiscal constraints, because every piece of that infrastructure costs money. Even if it's AIP funded, there's still a sponsor share. I think we all agree, and the commission has said before, since we are using our current PFC application to recover reimbursement funds for the terminal, that the air carrier passengers should be part of this. And I think you also have set forth through your policies that airlines should be a part of this. We address this through the airline ramp and landing fees and their office and space rent. But the other more difficult questions for the commission to sort of grapple with, well, should all passengers and all airlines, regardless of which part of the house they fall on, should they be contributing towards our commercial infrastructure? If so, that would involve a broader look at our rates and charges policy. Another item we should look at, if we look at where the accrual is to island businesses, we can look at our tenants. We have tenants who are energy jobbers. We have tenants who are landscapers. They benefit from visitors to Nantucket. Should our fair market value and lease policy consider the needs of our terminal and our infrastructure? Tom's not here, so I added this at the last second. I'm going to use the S word. If the benefit accrues to our general tax base, is it right to ask the general tax base to bear in the cost of some of these? Again, that's your problem, not mine. And then again, the state legislature and maybe even the feds, they all benefit State benefits from tax revenue and a way to support Nantucket without having to support a 30-mile bridge. And the reason we look for this at the sort of high level is because it feeds back into our, what's the next bullet, Dave? Into our cost centers, that's the word. At an administrative level, when we track where Johnny and his crew have worked for a week, we need to understand what level of materials, what level of time has gone into that. So when we do set rates, we know that we're doing that accordingly for our cost recovery, for cost plus. So getting into the weeds and into the tedium, there's an important need for that. So for summary, going back to our agenda slide, preseason, summer summary, and strategic planning. For the preseason, things are hard. Go forward a couple, please. So this is a challenging environment. We have aging infrastructure. We have a facility that was not designed to serve the purpose it's supposed to be. Federal grants are decreasing. We tell employees this all the time. When things seem difficult, it's because they are difficult. We're in a challenging environment, but I think that makes it fun. Then for the summary, again, the points are, this is a reordering, not necessarily a new order. We're dealing with the same volume of passengers overall in the summer, but they're hitting two different market sectors, or they've moved into a different market sector. And I think part of the summary is understanding how these benefits accrue and telling our story to policymakers and to the community. I don't think everyone necessarily understands this. And then from strategic planning, determining what we're going to provide and how we're going to deliver it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Is there one thing, Noah, that you take out of the study that we ought to do for next year, a bullet point of the most important thing, the second most important thing? I know you and I had a short discussion a few days ago about that, but things that are not hugely costly, but would improve the service. Not that you have to have a bullet point today. I'm just thought it follows from this presentation that, starting next year, what's the most important thing we could take from this? What's the second most important thing? And what's the third most important thing?
So I think we're already in line to address those because we will be looking at improving concessions and making a few more improvements to the hold room tent, a television. We're going to keep pursuing more TSA screening, little items, little comforts that you would see at other major terminals. The other aspect that I think it's a little off topic from what you're asking, but it's coordination with the Chamber of Commerce. We've been going after air service to stay alive and stay profitable. I think we're at a point where we can identify what air service does our community want. Philadelphia as a market, we talk a lot about. So I think that sort of communication and collaboration approach with the chamber and with other stakeholders.
Good.
You talked or spoke to comfort at the hold room. Cushions on the benches would be lovely.
I'm sorry.
When you're there for 3 or 4 hours waiting, as I was.
Cushions on the benches, or even a seating arrangement. There are people who design seating arrangements to meet different needs. I'm sure there's a better seating arrangement for that.
Yeah, because you could have used more seats the day when I was there, stuck.
Well, we are constrained by fire codes.
I realize that. Yes, I know they have kept up with safety numbers and stuff. But
Things are coming in one side and people aren't leaving out the other side.
exactly.
I had a couple thoughts. I think this presentation highlights what we've been talking about for a lot of years and sort of know collectively, but really puts out there that there's just a tremendous loss of local service and Nantucketers using the airport, and instead it's people from other places that are coming here, which I'm not saying that's a negative, but it really lays out how drastic that change is between the graphs relating the VFR and IFR traffic, as well as, it's really just that almost complete decimation of the commuter flights to Hyannis, and whether that's the fast boat, as we've kind of gone on and on about, or whether there are other factors. But I just would love to see, I think we all would, and if there's, just to see some resurgence or reestablishment of a commuter operation again to some extent. And I know there's only so much that we can do, and that's in the private sector, but I just feel like that's what we've really lost that I can see there, you know.
Well, you know, it's interesting. The Steamship Authority is doing a survey that's up on their website about what their mission should be and they basically talk about themselves as the transportation provider to the islands. And they aren't. They are a big part of it, but they are not the only one by any stretch of the imagination. I actually responded to the survey, and it's anonymous, as I recall. And I made that point that, you know, there are other people in the business. And you remember when we had the discussions a couple of years ago about the new fast ferry? It was more than a couple of years ago, probably 5 or 6. There's no process for integrating the services that are provided, the land and air services that are sea and air services that are provided. And I wish there was some way that we could find to at least talk to each other about those things. And you know, I've been wondering this week, for example, whether the fact that the steamship's fast ferry's been out of service quite a bit, and whether that had any impact on at least the inquiries that the air carriers were getting. If it didn't, it's really telling. But anyway, it's just, you know, a wish, probably wishful thinking on my part, but it's something that I would love to have some discussions at high levels about this kind of thing.
Well, it'd be nice to know if you're on a this happened to me this summer. I was on the fast ferry. I arrived, dropped a car, tried to get to the fast ferry. It was canceled. I hustled back and got a Cape Air flight. But I think I was the only one that did that. There were still only 5 people on the flight, and there was plenty of time for people to go from the steamship fast ferry back to the. There was a Retrix flight and a Cape Air flight that left 20 minutes after the fast ferry was closed. I didn't see any increased traffic. I think I was the only one. Plus, I wanted to get home. I was
Exactly.
you know, I was willing to pay the $93 to get on the flight.
Right.
I don't know if that's true for anybody else.
And then the one other thing, I was going to bring it up under commissioner comment, but it sort of crosses over here. And, you know, you brought up cost centers and then, you know, looking at revenue. And then you had mentioned earlier sort of the work that maintenance was doing. And I didn't want to bring it up in the middle of the summer, but I would like us to consider taking on a project that looks at what can we do to improve the landscaping for the parking lot and around the terminal. And would there be a way to make it less maintenance intensive? Perhaps a changing of the plantings, because the maintenance guys do this great job, like on the fields, on the stuff they can mow. But the problem is the way that it's set up right now, no one's got the time.
Well, maybe now that the garden club isn't doing the rotary.
Well, I mean, it's honestly, it's along the same exact lines, right? They can maintain something and make it look nice if it's set up for easy maintenance, like a mowing or a native grasses that doesn't need it. But what we have now needs hand weeding that you can see it's not efficient to have the resources to do that. And so maybe we could, over the winter, start a discussion and or look at if there's going to be some cost associated with that, then how we might be able to recoup that. But I think this was kind of a tough year. I didn't want to pick on anybody.
Well, I know. I believe last year we got some complaints. Actually,
I didn't want to complain, but you know, I think we could do better front of the house.
But I think it's a little better this year than it was last year. But you know, it's not great.
I think it's a function of how intense the maintenance requirement is because of the type of landscaping.
Right.
You know, we don't have the guys that sit, you know, and nor do we really probably want to be wanting somebody that's pulling weed by weed. So if it was something that was, you know, it'd probably mean taking the stuff out and changing it. So it's a bigger overall project. But once you do that, then the ongoing maintenance is much less. And it's, you know, something I think we could do. I just think we could do better.
Yeah. I believe staff's preference would probably be to contract that out to an existing company as an established budgetary item that's then recovered.
If we keep it
Cost.
the same, or maybe we, a change might, and that maybe do both. Right? Maybe you say, geez, we actually don't want to pay somebody $100,000 to prune the hydrangeas. I mean, just throwing numbers out, right? You know, and
Which
instead-
don't really need
And
pruning.
instead, if you just had some blue stem or something along there that just once a year gets done,
Well, let's turn it into a native grass plain.
just I would like to see us look at it.
It's funny that you say that, because this morning I saw a couple of maintenance guys out there doing measurements. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They go, oh, we're setting up for our budget next year. What they wanna do is they wanna pull all the grasses up and leave the trees and sod it.
Yeah,
Basically, the intent is to sod it.
Someone read
They
my
did
mind.
They did go out of the house, they got a couple estimates, and they were way out of line, and we can do it a lot cheaper in it, so. They are looking into sodding it. It was this morning, as a matter of fact. It's funny you brought that up.
yeah. Again, I knew summer wasn't the time. I wanted to wait to get past the summer, but to look at if there's something that you know, I could see it needing some funding and being a project, especially if it's going to be to do some, you know, if we need to be involved. I just would like to see us do a little better
A
with
job,
that.
full-time job for 2 guys all summer, just trying to weed that.
Yeah, and that's not
not
a good
productive.
No.
right. And I understand if you've got to have somebody, you've got priorities,
And we
and
stick the
that's
summer guy in there. You know.
so.
I came to work at an airport and I'm weeding the garden.
I honestly don't think hydrangeas need much care, because I've got them in my yard.
Well, it's the
with
weed
grass.
underneath.
It's
It's the weeds underneath.
The way, right, so I have grass. But my complaint has been about the cigarette butts. And is there something that you can sweep it up or suck it up or whatever? And I've mentioned it to Mr. Rafter, and they're just there, or a big bucket for people, the
We have
smokers.
a couple of.
But by going into the restaurant is where I look, is where I'm at most if I'm going in, and that's where it's all butts. And I'm not saying they're picking them up, and I don't want some worker probably to. There's got to be is there something that can vacuum?
Well, again, I don't believe we have a disposal thing right there by the restaurant, do we?
We do,
Do
but
we?
it's one of those high ones. I think a big bucket, if somebody's going to throw it, maybe they'll throw it into the bucket instead of that.
All right, okay.
I just
Anyhow,
general
that's just
Pun
my-
intended, but we're really getting down in the weeds
Well,
here.
I know, no, that was, okay, but I just, it was brought up, I figured I'd mention it.
And then my last, just trying to stay on topic for the report was, I was thinking that we should have there's the report coming that Noah showed the one slide of by the 15th, and I was thinking we should have an environmental subcommittee meeting to review the report and then discuss some strategies based on the information that comes from the report for then further discussion at the next meeting.
That's fine.
That works for you.
Encourage that. Anything else? Ms. Planzer, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carberg. That was very good.
Well done.
You're welcome.
Let's move along now. We have a ratification of the Mass DOT ASMP grant. It is in your packet, I believe. And also the FAA grant acceptance of AIP 70, safety and security equipment design only. This one I signed about 10 days ago under almost a gunpoint to get it done by September 30th. Because for whatever reason, it was promised and didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. Anyway, it's signed. Hopefully it's all set, but we need ratification of both these items. So may I have a motion, please, to ratify both of them as I read them?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion? How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
aye.
Ms. Blanzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right, some finance updates, please, Mr. Carberg.
Three items for the commission. The first is a PFC update. In fiscal year 19, we've collected $536,263. It's down slightly from fiscal year 18. It's not unusual to have a few payments lagging. We'll check that out and we'll report
They'll be
back.
get credited to 20 now, right? Or did they get credited to 19, the ones that lag?
I believe that's a question for Jamie and for where they budget. I believe they would be credited to fiscal 20 because I believe free cash will be certified shortly. Draft PFC application update, which is in your packet. Our current authorization to utilize our PFC expires in 2024. I know it seems a long way out, but this isn't too early in PFC planning to begin the new application. We've identified 16 projects valued at over $1 million. It's using the impose and use strategy of our $4.50 charge. That would take the next application out to 2029. And just as a reminder, these are eligible projects which have already been completed that we would be reimbursing ourselves for. The current list that's in your packet may change just a little bit in details or dollars, but we expect it to be back in November in a mostly unchanged format for your approval. And then for holiday sales, we've added the Nantucket project to our holiday sale tracking. It's not in your packet. It's rough order of magnitude equivalent in sales to Columbus Day with some year-to-year variation. For example, 2018 was the high year at nearly $300,000 in total sales. This year was down to about $200,000 in total sales. But we'll track that going forward.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue with the manager's report.
For project updates, our security project is out to bid with sub-bids due the 21st and the main bid due on the 29th. For Taxiway Echo, our preparation and site work continues as we are anticipating a fiscal year 20 grant, which would put construction work beginning in the fall of 2020. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll be working with a couple sub-consultants on survey and soils investigations. For the EIR, we held a final scoping call with the FAA. Most of it was to refine the projects that we could CADX or do the lowest amount of environmental investigation. Taxiway Echo will sort of be boxed and pulled out under a MEPA waiver and a MISA amendment. It's similar to what we executed for Taxiway Juliet in 2012, 2013. So the airport and both agencies are familiar with that. For Hold Room Phase 2, we have a delay in finalizing some punch list items. We're also preparing for the canvas takedown, which should take place on October 17th with a rain date for the 24th. And we'll be coordinating with our local operators on that final date. There's no update on the ALP geometry issue. We're still waiting for feedback from FAA. The fuel farm project was transferred to Jacobs. We're waiting for a scope for them. For we call it the Great Harbor Yacht Club project. It's really for the old fuel line pilings that are in the harbor and in a wetland adjacent to Great Harbor Yacht Club. We've assigned this to Jacobs. The capital has been approved. We'll have a scoping meeting sometime in the near future with work for this upcoming spring or summer. We've asked Jacobs to develop a SWIPS or a SWIP-like plan for us to look at our stormwater infrastructure and maintenance. A SWIPS is a stormwater pollution prevention plan, outlines the inventory of stormwater infrastructure and the maintenance that an airport would take on those. For the RFP bid update, the Bunker Road drainage bids, which we mentioned earlier, are due in on October 16th. We received interest from an individual who would like to build a approximately 7,500 square foot hangar. The purpose would be to hangar his own aircraft plus potentially 1 to 2 other aircraft for fee. The best practice is to issue a request for expressions of interest, then evaluate. This document is out for finance review. Then it will put it on the street. The security project will be utilizing the electronic bidding portal, which is our first use of this. We think it's a great increase in efficiency. And then on fuel supply, we're reviewing 2 proposals with the expectation to proceed to negotiation in the next few weeks. for an operations update. PFAS is the word. It's an acronym for a group of chemical compounds which are man-made and long-lasting in the environment. We're working with the town on a team-based approach to collectively engage a consultant for sampling. Our goal is to sample some airport wells in the late spring of next year. So as that develops, we'll be keeping you informed on that. The maintenance staff, Kirby in particular, I believe he has completed some paint rehab on the GA building trim. It looks very nice. This afternoon, the new TNC signs in the airport driveway were installed. They're the quarterboard style. They're up if you'd like to take a look at them.
You didn't bring a picture, did you?
I almost took a picture. I saw them. They look great. Thank you.
I'll let Johnny know. He worked hard on those.
Yeah, they look really good. I saw them this afternoon. And they weren't there at 8 o'clock, and they were there at 3 o'clock.
Staff is doing their seasonal snow prep. We've sent our 16 ARF folks off to hot fire for this year, which is always fun for them. It's hard work, but it's also a reward. We've taken delivery of a foam testing cart it's the E1 cart, has another name. The E1 cart, what it allows us to do is test our ARF vehicles and our foam proportioning without discarding foam onto the ground. We've completed certification for one of our pieces of ARF equipment. One individual turret on Airport 3 still needs a little bit more work for testing. We have our crew dismantling that. Once that's done, that's the last aspect of open item from our certification inspection letter. We have until October 31st to address. So we'll look forward to closing that out. There is a career fair in Hyannis next week on the 15th. Barnstable Airport is sponsoring it. They have a number of local aviation groups involved. I believe the invite was also extended by Barnstable to 2 Nantucket public schools. We're sending staff there. It's a STEM event. It serves 2 purposes, not only recruiting for our own needs, but also building awareness of aviation as a career to middle and high school students. For personnel, it's the time of year where we are down to our last few seasonal staff. We have a couple of really good workers who stuck it out with us. Columbus Day weekend is always a challenge. We'll do the best we can. We thank them for staying with us. Jamie Sansbury, our business manager, comes in for special recognition. At our October 1st Capcom meeting, she received praise from Capcom that the airport's documents and the airport's capital budgeting should be the standard for all other departments to be judged on. So I'd like to sit here and take credit for that, but all credit is due to Jamie.
That's great.
Very recently, I just received an update from Southern Air. It's not unexpected, but they will stop their seasonal service on October 14th to return in the spring. They wanted to pass along that they were very happy with the performance of both the Norwood and the Providence market, exceeding expectations. New Haven did not perform quite as well. They invested heavily in marketing, but they said in their business cases there was just not enough development and not enough interest in this time from local island residents and local businesses to keep the service going through the winter. But they look forward to coming back in the spring, trying to make it work again, and we would welcome them back as well. We held a second FAM event. I'm hoping to use the commission and whoever might watch the recording of this to understand that our FAM event, FAM stands for familiarization. We do run-throughs of the airport experience for families with children who have special needs. We're happy to do this. JetBlue made their aircraft available for return. The Rectric staff, the JetBlue staff, TSA staff, we're all great. It makes flying more accessible for our community, and we'll continue to make these events available for the community. I mentioned our YouTube channel. Ramp videos and drone videos are now available. You could just search Nantucket Memorial Airport YouTube if you're not that savvy and check them out. The Massachusetts Airport Managers Association annual conference is concluding today. We sent 2 staff members. We sent Lily Sylvia and Deb Crooks. We think that's a good opportunity for them. And that concludes the manager's report, or assistant manager's report. We'll do stats. Any questions before statistics?
Go ahead.
Okay, for August, our operations were up 19.97% over last August. Southwest Ramp operations were down 4.3%. Emplanements were up a little over 12% over last August. Cape Air saw a 19% decrease in emplanements. United emplanements were up 15% for August. Delta saw a 67% decrease, which was 1,815 passengers over last August. JetBlue had a 35% increase.
Are you going to have a discussion with Delta, or have you had the discussion with Delta about why the reduction in service?
I have not. I can reach out to them and see if they want to provide any insight to that. Airlines also tend to be notoriously
Right.
tight-lipped.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to know. I mean, presumably they had another opportunity elsewhere that they saw, and there maybe it wasn't as much fog. I don't know.
Yeah.
If they'll talk, it would be interesting to know.
I'll report back.
Thank you.
So JetBlue's 4,437 passengers corresponds to that 35% increase. Nantucket Air was up 16%, or 135 passengers. Tradewinds was down 6%, and Rectrix was down 16%. American was up 42%, or 1,752 passengers. In the Washington market, JetBlue was down 1%, or 7 passengers. American was up 19%, or 570 passengers. And the total DCA market was up 5%, or 563 passengers. In the Boston market, Cape Air had a 12% decrease of 456 passengers. JetBlue was up 5%, or 204 passengers. The market total was down 3%. New Bedford traffic was down 25%, or 263 passengers. Again, we think that's an effect of large construction projects ending. United in the Newark market was up 15%, or 495 passengers. In the White Plains market, Cape Air experienced an 88% decrease of 70 passengers. JetBlue carried 1,772 passengers. Rectrix did 39, for a total increase in the White Plains market of 1,741 passengers. In the Hyannis market for August, Cape Air was down 95%, or 173 passengers. Nantucket Air was up 16%, or 135 passengers. Rectrix was down 17%, or 203 passengers. And the overall Hyannis market was down 11%, or 241 passengers. In the JFK market, JetBlue was down 3%, or 211 passengers. For the LaGuardia market, American was up significantly by 1,200 passengers. JetBlue flew 2,679 passengers. Delta was down 67%, or 897 passengers. Rectrix discontinued service, and the total market was up 59%, or 2,064 passengers. Charlotte traffic on American was up 12%, or 33 passengers. Vineyard traffic continued to decline and was down 50%, or 46 passengers. New Southern Airways service, Providence was up. Providence did 128 passengers on 31 flights. Norwood, I'm sorry, I do not have Norwood numbers. My mistake. And New Haven did 25 passengers on 13 flights. Jet A gallons sold for August were up 1.19%, or just over 5,000 gallons. September was down almost 0.5%, or 804 gallons. Avgas was down 11% for August, or 2,600 gallons. For September, it was up 6.4%, or just under 1,000 gallons. Freight for August was down 1% over the previous August. And noise, I did not have the summary completed in time. I will have this with September for the next meeting.
Any questions?
None?
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along. Are there any commissioners' comments?
No.
I think I made them.
Okay. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to review executive session minutes as enumerated in the agenda for possible release, and to review and consider for possible release the minutes of September 10th, 2019. B, under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding the Gatto claim where the chair is determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. C, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Walsh where the chair is determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair is determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining commission position of the airport. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Topham? Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all very much.